It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, a beautiful day for a neighbor. Will you be mine? Could you be mine? Mr. Rogers came into our neighborhoods for almost 30 years. And he came, and when he talked to us, he always let us know that he was glad to be in our neighborhood. And he would sit and he would quietly talk to us about what was going on in our neighborhoods. He talked to us about our emotions. One time he even went so far as to talk about death and dying, and he talked about the death of his goldfish. And he really helped us look outside of ourselves so that we could show up our best selves. You know, if Mr. Rogers was alive today, he'd have a lot to say to you and to me, but he's not here. And I think that he has some things that I'd like to pull from what I learned in my life about helping us become the people that Mr. Rogers would like us to be in our neighborhoods. And he'd like us to choose our words very carefully. You see, I hope that you all have a piece of paper handy. I was going to make sure that I got that communicated before, but due to my technical problems, I wasn't. So I hope you have a pencil and a piece of paper handy, because I'd like you to write down these 4 words on your paper. Life purpose, belong, and matter. You know, like my little nephew Kevin here, who put on his baseball uniform, little league uniform, and he gathered up his baseball glove and his ball and his bat, and he went to the park. He went because he belonged to a team. And what he wanted to do was he wanted to know that he mattered, because he wanted to hit that ball over everybody's head and hit that home run and bring in 3 runs. Whether you're 6 like Kevin, or whether you're 66 or 96, we all have life purpose. We all want to know that we belong and that we matter a lot. Mr. Rogers would tell us that communication is really important to us. So if you happen to have that paper handy and you can write this down, write down, I communicate to. 1, get something done. Number 2, meet needs. Number 3, connect. Number 4, to create understanding. I think you can look at this picture of these 2 little girls who I captured one day as I was going to the swimming pool, and they were on their way home from school. They were picking dandelions, and they didn't need words to communicate that they were getting something done, that they had a need inside of them to meet, that they had connected, and they had a tremendous amount of understanding between themselves. We communicate to get something done, to have our needs met, to connect, and to create understanding. For you see, human emotions are a part, and they remind us that human emotions are everywhere around us in nature. And so if you have that paper, write down human emotions, and you might say, my needs are met when, or when my needs are met. I feel peaceful, loving, glad, playful, and interested. I had a friend come over for lunch earlier this week, and shortly before she came, I went out into my flower garden and I picked a bouquet of flowers and I snipped them and I put them into the pot and I put them in the middle of the table, or in a vase, and I put them on the middle of the table because I wanted to put a little bit more energy that came from all around us into our relationship. And we really did bring cheer into our relationship. But on the other hand, if you still have that piece of paper and you're writing things down, when feelings aren't met, we feel mad, we feel sad, we feel scared, we feel tired and confused. I spent a lot of my time as a young person, 50 years ago, in the neighborhood of Lake Street in Chicago. And at the advice of my younger sister, I decided that I was going to take a drive to 38th in Chicago. So I drove to 38th in Chicago 2 weeks after George Floyd had been killed. I put on my mask, and in my own silence, I walked around and I observed what I was feeling in the world around me at 38th in Chicago. People had told me it was sacred ground, and I wanted to feel that. When I got there and I stood there for about 20 minutes, I felt sadness. I felt real, intense, deep sadness within myself. I looked up at a window as I stood on the ground, and I saw a window that very well where the people might have been looking out the window and watching all of the activities and the brutality of what was going on. As I walked to and from of my car, I realized all of the disturbance that went on in those homes of those people that lived in those homes. I can only imagine how sad and mad and scared and tired and confused. Yeah, really confused with the emotions that they're feeling yet today. You see, when we want to communicate with people, emotions are how we communicate in the world. And when we have the goodness coming out within us, which we saw many signs of goodness. As I drove there, I noticed young people who were scrubbing, literally scrubbing with brushes and buckets of water, scrubbing all the graffiti off of the building to return their communities back to what they needed them to be. They were present. They were involved. They were tensely involved, and they were showing that they genuinely cared. And they were focusing on what matters. And when it's big things like that, we focus and we really engage our emotions. But perhaps if you're like my nephew, Kevin, and his little niece, Stella, they were really connected and they were thriving and they were moving on with their lives as they were looking at whatever it was that they had that particular moment that day when they were looking at their pictures sitting in their living room. They were present. They were curious, they were caring, and they were communicating in what really mattered. It really is those personal connections. You know, because on the other hand, so it becomes about choosing our words. Mr. Rogers would remind us to choose our words, and he might tell us to avoid using false speech, divisive speech, malicious and harsh things, or saying things that are idle and useless. So you might want to write these words down too. Hurtful words, false, divisive, malicious, idle, and useless. Because we kind of look like this tree when we show up and we use these things and we don't use the words that Mr. Rogers would like us to use. We feel hollow, shallow, and empty on the inside for a long time after we talk that way, and we feel the emotions in our body. On the other hand, Mr. Rogers would ask us to use thoughtful words. So write these words down. Thoughtful words are when we're truthful, when we're kind, when we're gentle, helpful, and we really do show up and we use things that are timely and appropriate for the conversation that we're having right here and now. You see, Mr. Rogers reminds and teaches us all to use our words carefully. And I have a request for you. If you have that piece of paper and you have those words written down for you, carry them with you and carry them around with you and check within yourself, pull it out and take the checklist and check and see how your emotions are doing at that particular moment. Because you see, whatever happens in the world, it starts in us, within you and within me. And if we want the world to change and to be different, we have to worry and we have to think about the words that we use. We all possess a goodness gene. And when we are experiencing that emotion that is goodness, we thrive and we flourish. And actually, goodness is in nature all around us. Just like a flower leans forward to the sun, and a bird or the butterflies seek out the flowers and the nectar in the flowers, humans respond to the emotions of the people around us and the words of the people around us. We sway back and forth depending on what it is that we encounter. So my friends, in my neighborhood, in your neighborhood, in your neighbor's neighborhood, choose your words carefully.
Thank you very much, Kathryn.